Hello everyone. Today we are going to read our chapter 8, The Making of the National Movement 1870s to 1947. We are going to read this chapter in 3 parts. In the previous chapters, we have looked at the British conquest of territories and takeover of kingdoms, introduction of new laws and administrative institutions, changes in the lives of peasants and tribals, educational changes in the 19th century, debates regarding the condition of women, challenges to the caste system, social and religious reform, the revolt of 1857 and its aftermath, the decline of crafts and growth of industries. On the basis of what you have read about these issues, do you think Indians were discontented with British rule? If so, how were different groups and classes dissatisfied? The emergence of nationalism. The above mentioned developments led the people to ask a crucial question: what is this country of India and for whom is it meant? The answer that gradually emerged was India was the people of India, all the people, irrespective of class, color, caste, creed, language, or gender, and the country, its resources and systems were meant for all of them. With this answer came the awareness that the British were exercising control over the resources of India and the lives of its people, and until this control was ended, India could not be for Indians. This consciousness began to be clearly stated by the political associations formed after 1850, especially those that came into being in the 1870s and 1880s. Most of these were led by English educated professionals such as lawyers. The more important ones were the Pune Sarvajanik Sabha, the Indian Association, the Madras Mahajan Sabha, the Bombay Presidency Association, and of course the Indian National Congress. Note the name Pune Sarvajanik Sabha. The literal meaning of Sarvajanik is of or for all the people. Sarva is all and Janik is of the people. Though many of these associations functioned in specific parts of the country, their goals were stated as the goals of all the people of India, not those of any one region, community, or class. They worked with the idea that the people should be sovereign, a modern consciousness, and a key feature of nationalism. In other words, they believed that the Indian people should be empowered to take decisions regarding their affairs. The dissatisfaction with British rule intensified in 1870s and 1880s. The Arms Act was passed in 1878, disallowing Indians from possessing arms. In the same year, the Vernacular Press Act was also enacted in an effort to silence those who were critical of the government. The act allowed the government to confiscate the assets of newspapers, including their printing presses, if the newspapers published anything that was found objectionable. In 1883, there was a furor over the attempt by the government to introduce the Ilbert Bill. The bill provided for the trial of British or European persons by Indians and sought equality between British and Indian judges in the country. But when white opposition forced the government to withdraw the bill, Indians were enraged. The event highlighted the racial attitudes of the British in India. The need for an all India organization of educated Indians had been felt since 1880, but the Ilbert Bill controversy deepened this desire. The Indian National Congress was established when 72 delegates from all over the country met at Bombay in December 1885. The early leadership, Dadabhai Naoroji, Frozen Shah Mehta, Badruddin Tayyabji, W.C. Banerjee, Surendranath Banerjee, Romesh Chandra Dutt, S. Subramanya Iyer, among others, was largely from Bombay and Calcutta. Naroji, a businessman and publicist, settled in London and for a time member of the British Parliament, guided the younger nationalist. A retired British official, A.O. Hume, also played a part in bringing Indians from the various regions together. Who did the Congress seek to speak for? A newspaper, the Indian Mirror, wrote in January 1886, "The First National Congress at Bombay is the nucleus of a future parliament for our country and will lead to the good of inconceivable magnitude for our countrymen." Badruddin Tayyabji addressed the Congress as president in 1887. Thus, this Congress is composed of the representatives not of any one class or community of India, but of all the different communities of India. A nation in the making. It has often been said that the Congress in the first 20 years was moderate in its objectives and methods. During this period, it demanded a greater voice for Indians in the government and in administration. It wanted the legislative councils to be made more representative, given more power, and introduced in provinces where none existed. It demanded that Indians be placed in high positions in the government. For this purpose, it called for civil service examinations to be held in India as well, not just in London. The demand for Indianization of the administration was part of the movement against racism, since most important jobs at the time were monopolized by white officials, and the British generally assumed that Indians could not be given positions of responsibility. Since British officers were sending a major part of their last salaries home, Indianization, it was hoped, would also reduce the drain of wealth to England. Other demands included the separation of the judiciary from the executive, the repeal of the Arms Act, and the freedom of speech and expression. The early Congress also raised a number of economic issues. It declared that British rule had led to poverty and famines, increase in the land revenue had impoverished peasants and zamindars, and exports of grains to Europe had created food shortages. The Congress demanded reduction of revenue, cut in military expenditure, and more funds for irrigation. It passed many resolutions on the salt tax, treatment of Indian laborers abroad, and the sufferings of forest dwellers caused by an interfering forest administration. All this shows that despite being a body of the educated elite, the Congress did not talk only on behalf of professional groups, zamindars, or industrialists. The moderate leaders wanted to develop public awareness about the unjust nature of British rule. They published newspapers, wrote articles, and showed how British rule was leading to the economic ruin of the country. They criticized British rule in their speeches and sent representatives to different parts of the country to mobilize public opinion. They felt that the British had respect for the ideals of freedom and justice, and so they would accept the just demands of Indians. What was necessary, therefore, was to express these demands and make the government aware of the feelings of Indians. In pursuit of gold. This is what a moderate leader, Dinshaw Vacha, wrote in Naroji in 1887. Wrote to Naroji in 1887. Feroz Shah is nowadays too busy with his personal work. They are already rich enough. Mr. Talang too remains busy. I wonder how, if all remain busy in the pursuit of gold, can the progress of the country be achieved? Freedom is our birthright. By the 1890s, many Indians began to raise questions about the political style of the Congress. In Bengal, Maharashtra, and Punjab, leaders such as Bipin Chandrapal, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, and Lala Lajpat Rai were beginning to explore more radical objectives and methods. They criticized the moderates for their politics of prayers and emphasized the importance of self reliance and constructive work. They argued that people must rely on their own strength, not on the good intentions of the government. People must fight for Swaraj. Tilak raised the slogan, "Freedom is my birthright and I shall have it." In 1905, Viceroy Curzon partitioned Bengal. At that time, Bengal was the biggest province of British India and included Bihar and parts of Odisha. The British argued for dividing Bengal for reasons of administrative convenience. But what did administrative convenience mean? Whose convenience did it represent? Clearly, it was closely tied to the interest of British officials and businessmen. Even so, instead of removing the non Bengali areas from the province, the government separated East Bengal and merged it with Assam. Perhaps the main British motives were to curtail the influence of Bengali politicians and to split the Bengali people. The partition of Bengal infuriated people all over India. All sections of the Congress, the moderates and the radicals, as they may be called, opposed it. Large public meetings and demonstrations were organized and novel methods of mass protest developed. The struggle that unfolded came to be known as the Swadeshi movement, strongest in Bengal but with echoes elsewhere too. In Deltaic Andhra, for instance, it was known as the Vande Mataram movement. The Swadeshi movement sought to oppose British rule and encourage the ideas of self-help, Swadeshi enterprise, national education, and use of Indian languages. To fight for Swaraj, the radicals advocated mass mobilization and boycott of British institutions and goods. Some individuals also began to suggest that revolutionary violence would be necessary to overthrow British rule. The opening decades of the 20th century were marked by other developments as well. A group of Muslim landlords and Nawabs formed the All India Muslim League at Dhaka in 1906. The League supported the partition of Bengal. It desired separate electorates for Muslims, a demand conceded by the government in 1909. Some seats in the councils were now reserved for Muslims who would be elected by Muslim voters. This tempted politicians to gather a following by distributing favors to their own religious groups. Meanwhile, the Congress split in 1907. The moderates were opposed to the use of boycott. They felt that it involved the use of force. After the split, the Congress came to be dominated by the moderates, with Tilak's followers functioning from outside. The two groups reunited in December 1915. Next year, the Congress and the Muslim League signed the historic Lucknow Pact and decided to work together for representative government in the country. This was the reading of our chapter 8, the first part of our chapter 8, the making of the national movement 1870s to 1947. If you have any doubt or query, you can ask me in the comment section below. Also, you can find the links to the other chapters and the other parts of this chapter in the description box below. Thank you everyone.